Hello, dear friends. The alarmists are now not the disclosures, but the central bankers themselves. Opinion piece. Bankers warning. Global supply could worsen, they say. Inflation will stay higher than expected. Global inflation has soared in recent months. Global food costs risk rising. Federal debt default would threaten the status of the dollar. Republicans divided on infrastructure bill. European justice annuls all trade agreements with Morocco. UK needs about 100,000 licensed truck drivers. European gas futures exceed $1,050 per thousand cubic meters for first time. Spain activates its diplomatic machinery for Algerian gas supplies. Let's start. Global supply disruptions could worsen. Central bankers warn. Supply constraints threatening global economic growth could worsen further, keeping inflation elevated for longer, even if the current price hike is likely to remain temporary. The world's top central bankers warned Wednesday. Disruptions in the global economy during the crisis has disrupted supply chains on every continent, leaving the world without the plethora of goods and services, from auto parts and microchips to container ships carrying goods across the seas. Still, no general advice can be given about stockpiling food because it will depend on each country and each area. In quotes, it will hold inflation longer than we had thought, said Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. ECB head Christine Lagarde expressed similar concerns, arguing that bottlenecks and disruption in supply chains, which we have been experiencing for some months, seem to be continuing, and in some sectors they are accelerating. Global inflation has soared in recent months due to a spike in energy prices, and production bottlenecks are pushing prices even higher still, raising fears that the rise could push inflation higher if it lasts long enough. The problem is that central banks have no influence over supply disruptions, so they are likely to be mere bystanders. Economy. New York Stock Exchange alarm. Wall Street firms are sounding alarms and disgusting of contingency plans as fears grow that Congress may not be able to reach a deal to raise the nation's debt limit in time. Stock market rises. Wall Street wobbled in choppy trading Wednesday, regaining some of the ground lost in the previous session's broad sell-off, though initial gains were capped by concerns over Fed comments on the debt ceiling. The Fed will reduce bond purchases. The Federal Reserve's massive asset purchases helped stabilize markets at the beginning of the crisis, but it will soon be time to start reducing them, said Philadelphia Fed Bank President Patrick Harker. Silver stands dropped to lowest in a year as dollar continues to rise. Silver extended declines to the lowest level in more than a year as the dollar advanced. Gold fell to the lowest in more than a month. Gold slides on dollar rally. Gold fell to its lowest level in 7 weeks on Wednesday as the dollar rose and expectations that the Fed may soon begin tapering its economic support measures. Indian jewelers sell gold online for $1. Jewelers in India began selling gold online for just over $1 after the crisis disrupted sales, forcing them to reevaluate traditional ways of doing business. Digital dollar on the verge of candy. The first phase of a multi-year research project of the Boston Fed is doing with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology on the technology that could be used for digital dollar is nearly complete and could be launched next month. Bitcoin touches biggest monthly price drop since May. Despite trading 2.8% higher Wednesday at $42,200, Bitcoin is forecasting a 10% monthly drop, the biggest loss since May. Hamster token became 6 times more expensive after Elon Musk tweet. The value of the hamster token surged more than 500% after Tesla and the SpaceX CEO Elon Musk reacted on Twitter to a news story about a hamster turned cryptocurrency trader. Tax hike. The wealthy are scrambling to figure out the best way to minimize the impact of the tax hike in the Democrats' package advancing in Congress. Home sales rise to 7th-month high. Contracts to buy previously owned homes rebounded to a 7-month high in August, but higher prices as supply remain tight is slowing the housing market's momentum. Vegetable meat market to continue to grow as price continues to grow. The market for plant-based meat continues to grow rapidly, expanding the product assortment and the number of companies present in the sector. The companies Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, whose veggie burgers are already enjoying success, are planning to reinforce their offerings with the introduction of veggie chicken nuggets. Tension between unemployment and inflation. Resolving the tension between high inflation and still high unemployment is the most urgent problem facing the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said, acknowledging that the central bank's two objectives are in potential conflict. X22 report. The tide is turning. The people's confidence in the economy is falling, and the citizen doesn't have much hope that the economy is going to improve. People blame this on the puppet masters. Debt apocalypse. Wall Street is nervous about Washington. The possibility of a fiscal crisis in Congress fails to act on the debt ceiling is getting more and more attention from investors and is seeping into certain asset prices. Washington judges debt ceiling catastrophe. A showdown in Washington between Democrats and Republicans threatens to trigger a financial and economic meltdown if Congress fails to act before October 18th, when the Treasury expects to run out of cash to cover its spending. Democrats fight to avert government shutdown. Democrats in Congress were moving to avert one of several concurrent crises they faced this week. Say they would vote to avoid the government shutdown before funding expires at midnight Thursday. Here is what will happen if the debt defaults. On Monday, Senate Republicans blocked legislation to raise the debt ceiling and allow it to avert an imminent government shutdown and possible default. On Tuesday, the GOP also rejected a proposal by Democrats to allow the debt ceiling to be raised. The US is hurtling toward the unprecedented historic prospect of defaulting on tens of billions of dollars in debt as government funding expires on September 30th, the end of the fiscal year. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned that the government is on track to run out of money on October 18th. Yellen suggested that the drop in investor faith in the US ability to pay its bills would send shockwaves through markets around the world, sending borrowing prices soaring and threatening the dollar's position as the world's reserve currency. Republicans divided on infrastructure bill. House Republican leaders have launched a comprehensive effort to secure votes for a bipartisan infrastructure bill before final vote on Thursday. Opposing leaders are leaning on their members to reject the $1 billion infrastructure bill, arguing that it was designed to pave the way for Democrats to pass their climate change bills. England. British Army to start driving tankers. Britain on Wednesday ordered soldiers to start driving tankers to replenish empty pumps as motorists continue to queue after nearly a week of shortages. European truck drivers don't want to go back to the UK. In quotes, the European Union workers we spoke to will not go to the UK for a short-term visa to help the British get out of the problem they created for themselves. It's not like offering a visa, and the problem will be solved. Drivers need much more than a visa and a pay slip, said Dutch Trade Union Federation leader Edwin Atima. The UK needs 100,000 licensed truck drivers. 3 more British energy suppliers stop trading. 3 more British energy suppliers stopped trading, regulator Ofgem said Wednesday, leaving more than 230,000 customers facing the prospect of higher bills. Isle of Wight was the scare island. Fossils found on a rocky beach show there was double trouble on England's Isle of Wight, some 170 million years ago, with a pair of large dinosaur predators living side by side and adapted to hunt along the water's edge. Europe. Brent is down 2.3%. Brent crude from November delivery was down 2.3% at the open on Wednesday on the London futures market to see $77.7 after rising above $80 for the first time in 3 years. Oil expected to reach $90 by the end of the year. Goldman Sachs raised its oil price forecast from $80 to $90 by the end of the year, following the recovery in demand and the shortage of oil supply due to the impact of Hurricane Ida. Gas futures in Europe surpassed $1,050 per 1,000 cubic meters for the first time. Gas futures in Europe set a new record high, rising above $1,050 per 1,000 cubic meters, according to stock market data. France asks the Eurogroup to decouple the price of electricity from the price of gas. France wants the Eurogroup meeting on October 4th to examine how to decouple the price of electricity from the price of gas, because it considers the current relationship to be incongruent from an environmental point of view and unfair to consumers. The European Justice overturns the trade agreements with Morocco for including Western Sahara, and Spain is the most damaged country. This Wednesday, the General Court of the European Union has given the reason to the Polisario Front and has annulled both of the fisheries agreement and the tariff advantages agreed between European Union and Morocco, because they include Western Sahara, a territory occupied by Spain until 1975 and still pending decolonization according to the UN, over which Morocco claims sovereignty. Demography as a weapon in the cultural battle in Europe. Demography is a weapon of defense for a part of Europe which, against the opening of borders to people and goods, opposes the defense of values that it considers vital to preserve its roots, customs, and culture. Sweden and Norway eliminate restrictions. Relief for bars and restaurants in Sweden. The country has eliminated this Wednesday almost all the restrictions that were in force and that affected these premises. In addition, there are no longer any limitations on private meetings and on premises. Norway is also returning to normal. The Norwegian government has lifted all restrictions. Sarkozy wants that separatism is not only a Spanish problem and asks the European Union to fight it if it does not want to pay a price. The former President of France, Nicolas Sarkozy, has warned that separatism is not only a problem that affects Spain and has asked to the European Union to fight it if it doesn't want to pay the price of disunity and disintegration of more European countries. In quotes, there is only one united Spain with a capital that is Madrid and a head of state that represents the territorial integrity of Spain, and this cannot change, he says. Spain activates its diplomatic machinery to secure gas supplies from Algeria. The Spanish Chancellor José Manuel Álvarez will travel to Algeria on Thursday 30th in search of agreements to guarantee the supply of natural gas from this North African country, Spain's largest supplier, despite the current political crisis in the Maghreb. Hundreds of Moroccan migrants tried to reach Ceuta. Hundreds of Moroccan migrants tried to reach the Spanish enclave of Ceuta from the border town of Castillejos in Morocco, after messages circulated on social networks about a relaxation of controls. Hundreds of migrants arrived to Spanish coasts in the last 48 hours. Several hundred people arrived irregularly to the Spanish coasts since early Monday morning from the African continent, of which 160 arrived in the last hours to the coast of the south and east of the country. Cybercrime rises by 32%. A total of 287,963 cybercrimes were registered in Spain during 2020, 31.9% more than in 2019, with which the sustained rise detected in this type of criminality, especially for frauds and scams on the internet, has shot up due to the crisis. La Palma volcano. The lava begins to gain ground to the sea, and the wind retains the toxic cloud. The lava of the volcano of La Palma has begun to gain ground to the sea to form a delta of about 500 meters wide, and from the moment the wind keeps away from the coast a column of water vapor and gases, possibly toxic, generated by the contact between the magma and the ocean. More than 1 million bananas have not been harvested. If there is one sector that has been affected by the eruption, it is the banana sector. More than 1 million kilos of banana have not been harvested, and as if that were not enough, the lava from the volcano La Palma devastated many plantations. Hundreds of hectares have completely disappeared. Effects of lava contact with seawater. The thermal shock between the lava flow and the ocean water causes the rise of huge columns of steam with particles of hydrochloric acid and glass particles. The cloud can produce acid rain, make navigation difficult, and cause skin and eye irritation. The lava washes away algae and mollusks from the bottom, but will create a richer ecosystem. The lava flow from the Cumbre Vieja volcano has already reached the waters of the Atlantic Ocean in the area of Los Guirres Beach, where it falls from a cliff about 100 meters high. The viscous mass forms a delta at its entrance to the ocean, on which it has erected a kind of pyramid more than 50 meters high. Spanish America. The president of the Mexican parliament wants a cheaper democracy. The president of the Mexican Chamber of Deputies, Sergio Gutiérrez, defended an electoral reform to lower the cost of elections, parties and electoral authorities, because Mexican democracy is one of the most expensive in the world. Mexico sends Haitian migrants on plane home. The Mexican government sent 70 migrants back to Haiti on Wednesday in what it described as a voluntary return flight, days after the US expelled thousands of migrants from a camp on Mexico's border with Texas. Tragic consequences of living at 50 degrees Celsius in Mexico. In Baja California, Mexico, climate change is causing once flowing rivers to dry up and temperatures to rise to deadly levels. In Mexicali, the heat poses a serious threat to the health of the most vulnerable people. The Cucapa community is fighting to recover the Colorado River and bring water back to fill their land with life. Organized crime center found in northern Mexico. Mexican authorities found a new center on land in Nuevo Laredo, in the northeastern state of Tamaulipas, bordering the US. First Mexican cryptocurrency, the MMXN, is considered the first Mexican cryptocurrency, but there are a number of myths and realities surrounding it, including where this digital currency has financial backing, but virtual currencies are not controlled by financial institutions, as everybody knows. Gold displaces gas as Bolivia's main export product. Gold has displaced natural gas as Bolivia's main export product in the first 8 months of this year, leading the growth of the country's trade surplus. A tribunal will hold governments accountable for the murders of journalists. 3 major press freedom organizations, including Reporters Without Borders, announced the creation of a tribunal to investigate the murders of journalists and hold governments responsible for these crimes by action or omission accountable. UN calls for money for poor countries. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Tuesday appealed for international solidarity to invest 1.2 billion a year to improve social protection in low and middle income countries. China. Evergrande rises 15%. The indebted China's real estate giant Evergrande climbed almost 15% on the stock market after announcing the sale of a large part of its shares in a bank to a state-owned company, and after Fitch downgraded the group's long-term debt rating again due to uncertainty over its offshore bonds. Global food costs risk rising as China faces a tough harvest. China is set for a difficult harvest season as a severe energy crisis hurts prospects for booming production, a development that risks triggering a further rise in agriculture and food prices around the world. A freezing winter could worsen China's energy crisis. The electricity crisis that is wreaking havoc on China's economy risks worsening this winter as freezing weather exacerbates rising energy demand and high fuel prices. China seeks to quell energy crisis fears. China demanded that railway companies and local authorities up their game in sending vital coal supplies to utilities as key regions face power outages that have crippled industrial production. China fights cryptocurrencies with digital yuan. China's digital yuan draws inspiration from cryptocurrencies while softening features to make cryptocurrencies unpopular in Beijing. BlackRock returns to China after rout. The world's largest asset manager, BlackRock Inc., has said it is returning to China's stock markets after their sharp falls this year and is betting that Beijing will start providing stimulus. China shows its military might. China presented new equipment for its air force such as surveillance and attack drones and an electronic warplane in a context of growing tension with Taiwan. China wants that the military alliance could unleash an arms race. The creation of the trilateral alliance between the US, UK and Australia could trigger a new arms race in the region. North Korea joins race for new hypersonic missile with latest test. North Korea conducted the test of a newly developed hypersonic missile this week, joining a race led by major military powers to deploy the advanced weapons system. Pyongyang launches another unidentified missile testing South Korean government. South Korea denounces North Korea's launch of a projectile. It is an unidentified projectile launched into the sea off its eastern coast. According to the Ministry of Defense of Japan, it is a short-range ballistic missile. Afghanistan. Afghan central bank exhausted dollar reserves before the fall of Kabul. The Afghan central bank depleted most of its dollar's cash reserves in the weeks before the Taliban took control of the country, exacerbating the current economic crisis. Taliban launched operation against Islamic State. The Taliban have announced the launch of an operation against the Islamic State in Kabul and Nangarhar provinces. Extraordinary G20 meeting on Afghanistan. An extraordinary meeting of the Group of 20 major economies will take place on October 12 to discuss Afghanistan. Taliban bans beer trimming in the Afghan barber shops. Earlier, local Taliban officials had ordered to closure all barber shops in Afghanistan's southern Helmand province. The group said the decision was based on Islamic rules. Musical performances are also banned in Helmand and Kandahar. Angry relatives of Beirut blast victims protest investigation delays. Hundreds of relatives of the victims of last year's Beirut port explosion, some chanting and others silent, took to the streets Wednesday angry that an investigation into the disaster had been delayed for the second time this year. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friend.